Hey friends, if you like the Nexus podcast, the best way to continue the learning is to join our community. There are 3 ways to do that. First, you can join the Nexus Pro membership. It's our global community of smart building professionals. We have monthly events, paywall deep dive content, and a private chat room, and it's just $35 a month. Second, you can upgrade from the Pro membership to our courses offering. It's headlined by our flagship course, The Smart Building Strategist, and we're building a catalog of courses taught by world-leading experts on each topic under the Smart Buildings umbrella. Third, and finally, our marketplace is how we connect leading vendors with buyers looking for their solutions. The links are below in the show notes, and now let's go on to the podcast. Welcome to the Nexus podcast. This is the next episode in our Change My Mind series. We've done these 3 or 4 times in the past. It's been a little while, so as we lead up to NexusCon 2025, we're going to have a few more debates at the conference this year, so we thought it'd be a great time to sort of revive the podcast version of these debates. So we were just discussing before this hit record, we used the word debate pretty lightly here. We're not here to really fight about anything. I think we agree on 90% of what we're about to talk about. But it is just a fun way to discuss the nuances of the decision-making process for building owners when they think about their technology programs. So I want to give credit to our participants, who I'm going to introduce here in a second, for sort of volunteering to be part of this innovative but slightly awkward format that we're about to do. So here's what we're debating. We're going to imagine that I am an ambitious building owner or operator who's been tasked with improving performance and efficiency across a portfolio of commercial buildings. We're going to just say multi-use, but we'll get into the nuances of different building types at the end. And we're going to assume that I'm a smart building strategist. I've taken Nexus Labs Smart Building Strategist course, shameless plug, and I've prioritized use cases. And now I need to help decide what to do first. I have a limited budget, and I need to basically decide between smart metering technology and occupancy counting technology. So if I go the metering route, I understand that this would allow me to figure out which systems in my building are using energy, how much, and when. And I know this can unlock different information and different decision making around easy upgrades, broken equipment, better controls to basically get the building's performance back on track. Alternatively, I could also use the budget to install occupancy counting technology, and this would allow me to know how and when a building or space is being used. And I know this can unlock underutilized or overutilized space and information to help me decide where I'm wasting space and resources and how I can optimize maintenance and cleaning schedules around actual space usage counts. So with that mouthful, we're going to kind of jump into the nuances of where I might start with my program. And so I have 2 absolute experts on this topic here with me today. So I have Tom Arnold, CEO of Gridium, and I have Jess Horne, head of sales at XY Sense. Can you both say hi, starting with you, Tom?
Hi, James. Pleasure to be here. Fun to debate this topic. And in an ideal world, you'd do both.
You do both. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we've put a key in every debate. You have to put a key constraint on the discussion, and we're saying we got to start with one. Which one is it? Jess, how about you? Can you say hi?
Yeah, it's thank you so much for having me. And, couldn't agree more, Tom. I was thinking the same thing, but I understand not everyone has budget for both. So excited to talk about this.
Awesome. What we like to do is start with an opening argument. So we've chosen Tom to go first here. That's how we do all of our debates. But Tom, you're going to kind of make the case for smart metering, and so you and I can go back and forth here. You can start, and I'll sort of ask you follow-up questions to basically say, just start us off saying, why should me as the building owner, why should I start with metering?
Well, I'll anchor on your first position, which is I don't have budget for both. And if you don't have budget for both, you're probably in an organization that has an ROI mandate or has to be a careful steward of the capital. And in our experience, looking at meter data and especially putting analytics on that data is incredibly hard ROI. that can gain support and credence for your future FM or other techniques that you want to do, but it's just an amazing quick win that helps you build credibility. And maybe you're new to the position. And so that's what I'm going to anchor on in terms of my debate here. Is really when you're starting, start with something easy and that's a win and that you can build from, and that provides foundational analysis layers for future things. So, for instance, if you think that there's an occupancy problem in the future, you might want to link that occupancy to changes in energy. But if you don't have the energy data, you're sort of grasping at straws in how to actually create that business case. And then, yeah, just to go back to the ROI, Gridium, of course, has very strong ROI. Lots of other tools do as well. And you'll find that that tends to be a big win in the organization.
And when you say quick ROI, can you talk about how, the user of the meter data is able to actually get that quick ROI? Can you give them some examples? And when I asked that, I realized I'm a little bit biased in my history as an energy engineer. So I know exactly how the data is being used, but not everyone listening to this is gonna know how that quick ROI is being driven.
Yeah. Let's talk about a few ways to get to the ROI. The first is getting the data. And what most building owners don't understand is that they already have the data. It's trapped in crappy utility websites all across the United States. And what Gridium does is go out and slip that data down on your behalf. We bring in the interval meter from those buildings. We bring in the bill data, the rate data, and then the computer runs through and finds opportunities for you. And just one very simple example is we automatically detect the start time of a building. So you might have a building that is programmed for full occupancy and is starting at 3 a.m. So that it's ready to go at 6. And you might be shocked to learn that is the case, because today's work patterns don't really support that level of building operation. So that's an example of how we actually do this is, automatically looking at the existing data layer, which is typically trapped in utility accounts, is free to get, put analytics on it, give it to an operator that can actually make action on those, and then prove the ROI. And then, of course, because we have the bills and a rate engine, we can show you exactly how much you save by moving that 3 a.m. start to, say, a 5 a.m. start, which in any considerably sized commercial building is a big dollar number and certainly pays for the software.
Hmm.
Typical time for value for us, people are getting value out of it the first week they use the software platform. And a typical onboard for us is less than 30 days. Typical ROI is 2 to 3 months. So very fast payback in terms of these solutions on the market.
And that's one of the first, I guess, nuances of this debate is it seems like there isn't necessarily a need to go install a bunch of hardware immediately with. So when we say go the metering route, the first step is go figure out what meter data you already have and apply analytics to it. So it's not necessarily requiring a big hardware installation, a big hardware purchase up front.
That's certainly the way that the market is going. And even when clients come to me, James, and say like, "Hey, I want to meter the condenser loop because I want to know how much all the IDF closets are using," I ask them, "What decisions are you going to make with that data?" "I'm not going to make any decisions. It's their IDF closet. They can do whatever they want with it." "Well, then why are you metering
Why are you
this?"
spending money on that? Yeah.
And that tends to be um, the natural flow here. Is it's very exciting to be able to meter lots of things, but I will tell you that we've looked at tremendous amounts of tenant-owned meter and landlord-owned meter data, and it's largely ignored. The only time it really gets used is for tenant bill back or cost allocation purposes. Just because you have meters all over a facility doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything with it.
Mm-hmm. And what would be the criteria that someone would need to like go through decision making criteria to say I need to go beyond whatever I can get from my utility, the data that's already there, and actually install new hardware?
There's two real reasons that you do that. First is you're dissatisfied with the latency on the utility feed. So in many high renewable markets like West Coast markets, East Coast markets, you're seeing exceptionally high demand charges. And of course, these tools help you predict and manage those demand charges, but they can be quite latent. That is, the turnaround on the data can be 48 hours, and it's not exactly real time. And so a lot of people choose to install main real time metering on the building level because they want that instant demand read, so that they can calibrate chiller operation, central plant operation to the demand charge.
Mm-hmm.
And the demand charge, like in a typical California office building, is 60% of the summer expenses.
Yeah.
It's enormous. So that's one reason is you're dissatisfied with the latency or other dimension of the utility feed. The second dimension is, yeah, just to go back to what I was saying, is are you going to make a decision on it? Are you actually going to use that data to change the way that you operate something or make a large capital decision? Then meters are pretty inexpensive. You can get revenue grade meters. You can put them into a control system if you're bold, or you can just get them out to a flexible platform as fast as you can. And of course, it's very useful to look at that. I try to ask questions to clients about why not just temporarily meter something. We do energy audits all the time, and we take spot readings all the time, and that's a very good idea on what's actually being used in terms of energy. Again, if you want to push this metering layer down into the facility, what are you actually going to do with the time series data?
So it seems like, I mean, to try to summarize, if you were making the case
Yeah.
for what to do first in my program, it seems like what you would say is, start with your meter data that you already have, that your utility already has, um, and then analyze that with analytics software of some sort. If you need, install temporary meters, and then if you want to go beyond that because it's going to help you make ongoing decisions, then you would install permanent IoT or smart meters from there. Is that sort of
Yeah,
the,
I think
the
that's
game plan?
the right recipe. And just to return to the debate, the thrust of my argument is walk then run. And if you don't have a system that monitors the whole building load and deals with issues of rate and demand charges and bills, and really helps you understand when and how you're using energy, you can't really do any interesting downstream exercises from that. And it might be a surprise to know that most buildings in America do not have this technology. It's available for a few $100s a month. There's no hardware costs associated with it. There's, a selection of 3 or 4 players that are credible in the market, including Gridium. You can go pick your favorite one. And it's typically available on, month to month basis. So it works with commercial real estate. So that's where I think the bulk of the market is. It's very interesting to study people that have gone, of course, a lot further, but the bulk of the market has zero visibility. They get a utility bill from their accounts payable, and that's about it.
Hmm. Right. Okay. And what you're describing that comes from the utility, just so that people understand, is your utility generally has already invested in some sort of automated metering or infrastructure, like every 15-minute data, so they can see what your building is using at the whole building level. You're just talking about pulling that and making it usable and making the analytics and insights from that data available for the building operator to use.
That's 100% correct. 85% of the United States is in a utility district served by automated metering infrastructure, or AMI. That data is freely available through utility portals. Those utility portals are, of course, built for residences. So they don't take into account the fine tuned operations of commercial buildings. we take that data plus the bill data plus the rate data, weather, occupancy, other types of uh, data, and produce an energy management as a service software that helps people take action on the diagnostics that we find.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think that's a great opening statement from Tom. Um, I think I'll summarize it just a little bit further in saying, like, the crux of your argument is around you're not spending barely anything, and you're getting pretty much immediate payback in most cases through this analytics that you didn't have before. Makes perfect sense. All right, I'm going to stop you there, Tom, and we'll save whatever else you had prepared for the future parts of the debate here, and go over to Jess. Jess, you're not having any sort of rebuttal. We're going to save that. You're basically just saying, you're laughing at me. I'm trying to make this a serious thing.
Okay, I'll be very serious.
No, we can laugh. It's fun. You're giving your case for occupancy data, and then we'll go through rebuttals after this. So go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean, I will point out that it sounds like we both have a real-time component. So that's something that at least, is the same in both of our offerings. For anyone that's not familiar with XY Sense, we do offer real-time occupancy sensors and workplace analytics. And there's so much that you can do with that other than just getting, occupancy analytics. And we'll kind of talk about that. First, I will say that anytime we're working with someone, whether they're, new customer, existing customers, it's really first understanding their use cases. And I have to bring this up just because there are so many different use cases and there's different ways to have both hard ROI that we can prove very quickly, depending on their use case. And then other even intangible kind of ROI like employee experience. So there's really kind of two different sides to it. I will talk about a couple of like the most common, use cases in the hard ROI. I do have to point out, obviously there's no secret. We sell occupancy sensors. That is kind of the means to the data. So you do need that, to get the data, but really understanding the use cases can cut down on some of the costs, because you may have some of our customers will come to us and say, I need to cut 20% of my real estate. And I know that, these buildings are kind of our, primary sites. They're not going anywhere. So we still want to cover them. We want to really understand how the actual space is being used. But then we have this others that maybe 20% that we probably will be getting rid of, but we want to make sure we have the data to back it up. So instead of just covering it with sensors, we have a complete sensor suite. So you could look at that and say, well, let's do entryway sensors. So at least we're getting real-time people count. And you're getting that accurate count to be able to say, and you may only need that for, 3 to 6 months or so, to be able to show, yes, we do need to go ahead and, shut down those offices. And that could end up being some very quick ROI for you. Most of our customers, though, want to really invest in, the entire technology suite, integrate with other smart building integrations. A lot of times what will happen is then, for those primary locations, they will cover it with our area sensors, entryway sensors. We have presence sensors now. They're getting all the real-time data. What they're doing is a lot of times they want to integrate with their smart building system. So we actually can integrate with HVAC and with lighting. So you can cut down, but you need that occupancy, real-time occupancy data to make those calls. So that's something we actually had a company that has saved over $3 million a year just integrating with those, and then not having to, heat or cool areas or have lighting in areas that weren't even being used. So that's actually a big thing as well. We have a lot of companies that, use the data to then completely remodel their space, make sure they have the right types of rooms for their employees. And they also use it for internal debates. So kind of talking about debates again, we all know in the office, a lot of times what happens is, someone will come, a department head will go to the head of real estate, I need more space. And either it could be A, they look at the, occupancy data and say, actually, you don't need any more space. Like according to, your occupancy rates, like you're not, you don't need any more space. Or if they do, they can look at other departments that maybe aren't utilizing it as much and then say, well, let's see if we can actually take some of that space. We've had other customers. We have a financial services customer that did this and saved $1.6 million annually because instead of having to build out new space, they were able to just use existing space and use their existing occupancy data. We also, we have customers that lean into like cleaning as well, so that's another quick win. That you can use this actually to clean spaces that are not being used. We now send like text alerts and things like that to notify you. So those are like more of like the hard ROI, because I know that that's really important, especially if you have a tight budget. And it's like, listen, I'm going to have to be able to go back to my CFO and say, hey, we invested in sensors. This is the ROI we're getting. So that's, really important. But to be honest, there's a whole intangible piece of this with employee experience and wellness that we're seeing a huge increase in. It's hard to put hard ROI on that. But a lot of our, customers are integrating this so that, there are still RTO mandates coming out even now, which is crazy. Like 5 years after COVID, we're still, talking about the same things. And, now when employees do show up to their office, they want to make sure that, it's for collaboration. It's for to make sure they have the right space available. They have a great day, so they want to be encouraged to come in more. They want to walk up to a real time, kiosk display and be able to choose spaces that are available. Some customers are integrating with indoor air quality. They want to kind of empower the employees of like, I want to choose this desk because it's, there's not a lot of noise around there. It's, cooler in this area, and it's just a healthy environment. So they're really empowering them with that as well. So I know that was a lot, but there's just so much that we have so much fun in our jobs of being able to really kind of hone in on different use cases and how our customers are using, our real-time sensors to get, the data and the integrations they need.
Thank you. So when I think about as a building owner and I'm thinking about getting started, when Tom sort of laid out the path with metering, there was sort of this like, I don't have to spend very much money getting started step. You
Yep,
guys are obviously a sensor provider. And so what you're talking about is a bigger upfront cost with buying the sensors, installing the sensors, et cetera.
correct.
So if I'm thinking about heading down the space utilization road, is there a sort of no cost like use existing data step that's even possible here, or is it typically just focusing on getting sensors where I need to get them to answer the questions I'm looking to get answered?
It can be a hybrid approach, but to get the granular data that we provide today, at least, we're always looking into other options, but today you do need sensors to be able to get that. That's what I was saying in the beginning of kind of sitting down is we don't necessarily have to say, listen, you need to invest in every type of sensor we have in all of your spaces. It doesn't have to be that. We do offer different pricing models too, so that there is more of an upfront cost, but less, year over year. But it is, there's no really skirting around that, is there is a cost to actually get the sensors, to get the real-time data. Um, but if you're getting the ROI of, I talked about a couple of examples. It could be a couple $100,000 a year up to like some that are on the, bigger side, saving like 7 million in real estate. It just depends obviously on your use cases, what's important to the company, what their initiatives are, what they need to integrate with. Cause I've seen a lot more smart building initiatives where it's, they're wanting a full ecosystem and everything to be talking to each other and cutting down costs, that
Hmm.
route as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, we had an RFI that we went through with BXP last year, where they were already looking at turnstile data for their biggest buildings.
Yep.
Essentially, just a very not granular sort of big picture.
Yep.
This is a big high rise. here's generally how many people are using it on a day-to-day basis. But they were looking to get into sensors to figure out what questions that wasn't answering for them. And that's where it seems like the crux of this decision for me as a building owner would be, is like, what questions am I trying to get asked? And I'm
Yes.
hearing that from you too, is like, it really depends on what questions I'm trying to get asked. If I'm trying to close down that building over there, well, validating that seems like a pretty high ROI
Yep.
decision, like that kind of thing. So that's really, it seems like, um, educating me as the buyer. It requires me to sort of come to the table with, like, these are the questions I'm trying to get asked. And if I'm coming to you with that, Jess, what you guys normally do then is to say, like, here are the quickest hitters that we
Yep.
can help you with, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we take the crawl, walk, run approach as well. It's typically, it could even be a pilot. It's like one site, it's kind of to prove the ROI before there's further expansion and unlocking, more budget too. So we understand that. So ROI is very important. And to your point, you brought up badge data, which, every company I've worked with, I mean, they're collecting badge data, but they also know that it's not that reliable and it's not that accurate. It's very manual to actually pull and actually analyze the data. So that's where I talked about even just entryway sensors. So we really take, and that's why we have an amazing customer success team too, and really to work with the customer. We'll use a lot of examples of, how we're helping customers today, but it is a journey, and it usually starts with just one small step, and we'll help you with that. And then kind of expand from there. Most customers don't just go all in with all, integrations and use cases at once, but, over the journey, the customer journey, they definitely, add more. We help educate them and show where they could be unlocking more money.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, Thank you. Let's go into sort of talking specifically about the other side and why your side is better than the other side. And what I think probably makes sense for us to do is sort of level set here, Tom. So you talked about, obviously, the first step. I think it makes sense, and I'm the decision maker. I'm the person with the budget. I think what Tom's saying around, like, yeah, you can spend no money and basically get started analyzing the data that the utility has for you. Great. I think that makes sense, right? It's always going to make sense to sort of
Not no
across
money.
your
You
whole.
still got to pay Gridium, but
Yeah, you still got to
some
pay
money.
Gridium. Yeah. So it's a
A
smaller
modest
upfront
amount of money.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I kind of want to, like, level the playing field, because from the occupancy data side, there isn't really that, like, very low cost, no cost first step like there is on the energy side. So let's
Well,
just
there
say,
is. There's badge and turnstile data, which is analogous. Unfortunately, our experience, and Jess, you probably have the same experience, is the data doesn't really show you very much.
Yeah.
yeah,
And when it does show you something, it just makes you cry. Because the history and structure here is one where the landlord owns the building. In your example, BXP, they own the building. Tenants have all kinds of patterns. The landlord controls the equipment. The equipment has operating procedures governed by a lease. And the sad truth of COVID is that totally empty buildings ran perhaps 10-20% lighter than normal. And in fact, the most noticeable effect was that they increased their gas usage because we weren't heating them with our bodies.
Oh, interesting.
And that's the sad reality here. Is our industry blows air at the same rate into vacant spaces as occupied spaces, and it's very difficult to imagine how we're going to get to our net zero and energy efficiency goals if we don't fundamentally change that. But adding more sensors right now to a TI space is not going to change the way the landlord runs the building. And in fact, there are other barriers here, which I think building HVAC professionals will experience, which is most of these towers still have 30, 40, 50% pneumatic space. So even if you wanted to change the air conditioning in an unoccupied space, you don't have the ability to do it at the zone level. So then what are you going to do? Shut off whole floors? Even that doesn't seem reasonable. So I agree with Jess that there's a long history of using occupancy data in space planning markets, and it has huge ROI because it teaches you to produce the space that you want to produce from real data. And I think your innovation to add real time to it is awesome. But that doesn't answer the question of a smart building professional in a multi-use commercial building scenario deciding that this is their anchor project that's going to advance their career. I worry a lot when I see those requests, especially from young professionals, because I worry where they're going and what the benefit it is that they're actually going to see.
Well, and we typically we have I mean, there's been a few owners that we've, worked with, but typically we're working with the tenants because they're the ones that are actually wanting to know, how their space is being used. That's that's typical. So that's something to just keep in mind as well.
And say, have you ever worked with both? Because isn't that the opportunity for our industry? Both parties view the other as a complete black box. And if yet both of them had this data available to them, they would make better decisions together. We see that on the metering side. We have a landlord and a tenant that both share their meter data with each other, and it's fantastic. The
Yeah.
landlord runs the base building, the tenant runs their equipment, and they make better decisions to get together because that data layer is exposed. And maybe I'm optimistic or pie in the sky, but imagine if BXP had occupancy level data for its tenants, how it would run the building differently.
And that's exactly what they're looking at. I don't want to act like BXP is farther or not as far along as we're making them sound. That's exactly where they're headed with it. It seems like they're on a very innovative path there.
Yep.
Yep.
They are for building owners for sure. 'Cause it seems like what happens sometimes is, the building owner, you know, d they wanna maybe invest in, like, entryway sensors because then they can get at least that, people count, floor by floor, real-time analytics, but then they kinda so far, which I agree with you, Tom, I think there's an opportunity to, like, work together closely, but where, if the owner and the tenant actually worked closer together, there that would be great. There is an opportunity, but it doesn't seem like, at least since I've been in the industry, I haven't seen where those lines have crossed too much. It kind of seems like from the owner perspective is like, I want to know the people count. And even that isn't as much. Like BXP is ahead of their time. Typically it's like, we're just going to let the tenant do what they want and we'll kind of leave them alone from there. Now the tenant does sometimes then use this to say, hey, we need less space or we need more, or we need,
Hmm.
indoor air quality. Hey, your air in here is not as great.
Yeah. And I think this highlights the role that, I mean, the hypothetical role that I'm supposed to be playing in this debate, which is I'm the smart building champion. It's on me to go into the organizations and find who's the user, who are the stakeholders that I need to
Yeah.
engage here, and how can I make this work for whoever those use cases are assuming is going to use this and benefit from it and hold it back and all of those things. The smart building champion is really the one that's going between all these different parties and smoothing these things over
Yeah.
versus just implementing technology in a silo on the landlord side or a silo on the tenant side. Um, maybe we should have added that to our debate brief at the beginning here. Um,
Well, maybe as part of I guess from a debate perspective. So you said you had budget. So then I would say, great, like let's figure out your budget and see how we can work together within what we're offering. And even if it's a little less than you initially were hoping for, if we can prove the ROI and unlock savings in other areas, then we can look to expand this. So there's obviously budgets. At least you've given us that, which is always positive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another skill of the smart building champion, right? We talked about ways to get quick savings,
Yeah.
right? Can you get those quick savings and then snowball those into a bigger budget to then do the next thing and the
Yeah.
next thing? Yeah. Yeah. Um, can we talk a little bit about so say we get past the low cost, no cost stuff. I'm trying to create a little bit of a debate around, do I buy new meters or do I buy new occupancy sensors? What are your guys' thoughts there? I heard a little bit from you, Tom, if you want to start, around decision-making criteria on new meters. But what about deciding between new meters and occupancy sensors? And one way that we're confusing each other and everyone here a little bit too is that we're talking about different users and different use cases a little bit here. So an energy manager is going to take a new meter and do something. A space planner is going to take a new occupancy sensor and do something. So we're kind of crossing those. But generally, let's assume when we're talking about these that in my organization, I'm the smart building champion and I could go engage my energy manager or I could go and engage my space planner or my tenant, et cetera.
Yeah,
So it's a hard question.
it is a hard question. Go back to my original proposition was, which is it depends, and why can't we do both? Look, if you've used commercial or mixed use or multi-use as the framework here, and I think that if you really don't have deep penetration of the BMS in that building and you don't know where the energy is coming from and you're trying to find that, I think the energy manager is going to have a good case. Or if you're in a vertical like life science or medical manufacturer or these mixed use campuses where we see very high energy densities in one part
Mm,
of the facility,
right.
um,
Like a
you know,
lab or a
yeah, people
central plant
experimenting with
or
AI, et
mm,
cetera, then you should get additional metering. It's kind of beholden. It's incumbent upon you to understand how the facility works at a base level. And if you're still grasping at straws, you're not going to be able to really formulate your system strategy in the building. Um, I think with regard to the independent data layer, I think everybody should know what that correlation is. And Jess, I don't know if you do this, but we study this from time to time. We look at parking lot data versus occupancy. We look at badge swipe data versus energy. We look at any number of correlates. And I tell you, when we show people the regression analysis, people cry.
of occupancy data versus energy consumption. Is that what you're
They
saying?
just cry.
Hmm.
The building owners and managers association, I serve on the chair there, and they have published lots of rules, and one of the longstanding BOMA rules is that half your energy is fixed. That is, it's just the base building use in the building, and half of it is variable. And COVID showed that was completely wrong. The reality is, and the sad reality is, it's all fixed. There's maybe a 10% variable, maybe 20 if you're really lucky and have full DDC with really nice G36 sequences and setbacks. Maybe you get to 20. But the reality is these buildings run. They just run. And I think people should understand that before they go sprinkle sensors everywhere. Because again, if you don't really understand that, you don't know the problem you're attacking. You're not saying I'm going to collect this data and make decisions on it. You've got to say currently our building does not respond to occupancy. I want to put occupancy in so that we might have an energy response to occupancy in the building. So that's where I would go here from the spend analysis. And again, I'm trying to separate like the building owner concerns from space planning concerns for a tenant, which I totally get. It's a totally different thing. But if you're a smart building professional, you're probably at the building level of analysis of how do I control this thing called a building, and how do I make it as efficient and as smart and responsive to its occupants as I could.
Hmm. Okay, Jess, go ahead and feel free to take the tenant landlord uh, into account as well.
Yeah, of course. So, you know, what I would say, I mean, of course, I'm always going to say move forward with occupancy sensors, but it's really because you're not just getting that. So, if energy management is also important to you, we have an aspect of that. So if that's something that's part of it, you're getting not even a 2-for-1, probably a 10-for-1, just getting back to like what systems you want to integrate with. You can integrate with BMS systems. We have a lot of customers that end up taking different sources of data and actually, putting them all into one dashboard to really be able to see and compare, the different types of data that's coming into a building. So you're not just I know, like, just from the name occupancy sensors, like, yes, okay, occupancy data, but there's so much more. If you want to cut down on your energy and lighting, great. We have real-time sensors to help accomplish that use case. If you want to cut down on even your food and beverage, we actually have a customer. This is kind of a niche use case, but it seems like anytime I talk about it, people get excited because they hadn't thought about it. But they actually put sensors all over their, cafe areas, pantry areas. And they actually, every week, their head of food and beverage gets an email showing the, actual occupancy from the previous week. So then he orders his food based on that. So there's so much more versus just, it's easy to say, hey, put some sensors into a building. If and the reality is they may see the data and cry, like you said, Tom, because they're like, wow, we're still at 20% occupancy. Like, this sucks. That's just kind of that's the reality. But that's why it's just a much deeper conversation of, it's not just the occupancy analytics, it's also integrating with IWMS systems or room booking systems, smart building systems, and using it for these different ways. So that's what I would say is
Yeah.
you're going to get more for your money.
And I think this highlights one of the challenges in our industry. If I were to actually choose between different technologies, I need to go to those individuals in my organization that this is going to affect and like start to figure out the exact ROI or exact benefit analysis for each of these based on how it's going to affect their jobs and then like rank them somehow. And that analysis is actually just really difficult to do as we've sort of been exploring. So all of the smart building champions out there, that's the job right now is basically
Yeah.
going out and deciding all of these things. And really ranking your use cases based off of how much they're each are going to benefit the organization from a business standpoint.
Yep.
Let's move on here with a few minutes left and discuss like basically the nuances of different types of buildings in this discussion. So we've been centering around offices. Tom, you just mentioned a little bit around labs and university campuses, that kind of thing. Can you guys talk, and Jess, you can start. How does this discussion change when you're talking about different types of buildings?
Yeah, well, you brought up labs, which is actually, I mean, that's where we're very highly deployed within a lot of our customers and in their lab space. So it's actually a lot easier. Lab space is one of the most expensive types of spaces out there. And it's, one of those that has to be highly monitored. And so in some ways, it's easier to get quick ROI in those types of spaces just because of that. Um, it's different. Like, we do have some higher ed, some universities and some customers in that sector. Ironically, they have labs too. So even though, and honestly, a lot of the use cases are very similar with them. Um, Otherwise, if it's some of the customers we've worked with where I kind of brought this up in the beginning, where they have just different types of buildings, right? You got kind of like your class A, headquarters, or, a regional office, and those are really important versus, maybe you have some like satellite offices that you're just not getting people coming into, and you want to have some quick data and then, be able to prove that you need to shut those down. That's a little bit different ROI than, like I said, the lab space, where those are highly coveted, very expensive, and highly monitored. So I have found that it's easier to kind of show the ROI in those spaces. But we really just focus more. I mean, it's not a lot of like mixed use and things. I mean, with us, it's mostly just, office buildings and, if it's just different
Hmm.
verticals, obviously. But um,
Makes sense. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, our customer base is largely office, life science, medical office. again, a scattering of hospitality and education, but that's most of the market for us. And of course, most of those buildings are investment properties. There's a landlord tenant relationship. We do have corporate campuses, and in fact, we share clients together that have deployed both of these technologies, and that's the dream. You want both working together. It's not what you set up as this debate, but that tends to be where we see this technology co-located.
Yep, got it. And let's talk about, from the standpoint of both of these technologies, the nuances of that. We've talked about it a little bit, but the landlord tenant arrangement, how does that affect the decision making and on these two different technology categories, and how I might go about purchasing it?
I mean, this is changing, but essentially, landlord's business for 200 years has been to sell you a concrete box, and you do whatever you want with it, and build it out. And then part of the lease negotiation is just this number, which is the TI allocation that you get. And so it's been very rigid around its building rules and regulation. The lease governs everything, and then of course landlords don't have any real agency in operating costs. They're just pass through mechanisms, and so it's very difficult to capture savings because say BXP is very interested in installing. We're going to do something simple. We're going to put occupancy trackers in every tenant conference room, and we're going to cut 3,000 CFM to 200 CFM if nobody's in the conference room. Like brain dead simple, would be supported from an energy payback alone. If they do that and bear the capital expense, it's the tenant bills that go down. And that's why, of course, you see every conference room in America walk into it as the first person and it's blowing 3,000 CFM. And that's a tragic loss from an energy perspective. So, but that is the market. 85% of buildings in America are investment buildings. So unless our industry figures that out, and of course you mentioned some progressive leaders that are looking at this, unless our industry figures that out, that's what it looks like. Which is, again, you can install all the systems you want, but unless you have control of that box that feeds air into that conference room, you're not going to get the ROI. And if you, the landlord, put it in, your tenant's going to get the ROI. Could we be, for instance, as an industry saying, these are recommendations that you want to see it build out? That would make a massive difference to the energy use and that linkage between landlord systems and tenant systems. So that's what we see as a sort of the state of play in the bulk of the market. And it's so tempting as smart building professionals to think about the gold-plated tech campus where you have unlimited budget. But if we're going to grow this industry past, a few thousand buildings into hundreds of thousands, we've got to be just deploying thinking like that.
Yeah. Jess, how does it affect on your end?
Well, it's very different because of their priorities. So they want different analytics. So that's the biggest thing is, the landlord, and it's a lot what you said as well, Tom, the landlord really would just care about overall occupancy. They're not necessarily caring. I mean, if they have a tenant in the whole space, they don't necessarily care how the space is being used. They just want to maybe have an overall, like a big picture idea of how many people are coming into the space, for the day. That's really, and also sometimes there can be a safety component. I've had this come up a couple of times where they want to know how many people are on like each, level, just for a safety perspective. But that's really it. And what I've, found with working with building owners is they aren't sure, by adding this that necessarily they're going to be making so much more off the lease. So they're like, we're just going to let kind of the tenant, take that fee and kind of see what they want. But for the tenant, it's very important because, for many, many reasons, but they want to know which spaces do they have the right spaces? And they can find that out by knowing like which spaces are being used. Do they need to, work within the landlord to say, hey, we're going to be remodeling, and we're going to be doing some other things because we're not, we don't have the right space today. If they're integrating with, HVAC lighting, they're the ones, that want to save the money, not necessarily the landlord. So it's just very different priorities. And so it's a completely different conversation.
One anecdote just to sort of like put this and encapsulate it. We do a lot of chief engineers, and chief engineers, of course, get dispatched for these problem hot and cold calls. And a chief recently, they have terrible south facing glass. He always deals with winter hot calls in this side of the building.
You're
And
saying
he's
that as the sun's going down in this room that I'm in right now, and I'm
yeah,
suddenly getting hit by
e-
sunlight, and I'm now
exactly,
hot. You're like
exactly,
saying this
right.
is a perfect time for you to say this. I'm like, oh man, I'm
Exactly.
hot. I
And
wonder why.
he's like, we told them to put DDC in their TI budget and this would go away. That is, to digitally instrument the air in that building. And they left the pneumatics in there and they wanted to do the cafe instead. And now they're suffering the consequences. But that story is told over and over and over again in commercial office buildings where there's a set of money available, and people don't use it for the problems that are chronic and will affect their comfort in that space. They use it for the nice build out and the cafe, and everyone has their own priorities, but that's the conversation that's broken. And so this tenant landlord split is huge. Any smart building professional that works in multi-use buildings will be very familiar with it. And if you're not, your first project you'll encounter it.
Totally. I want to close off with one last question around you guys both have software applications
Mhm.
that um, occupancy data gets installed through sensors. That data then goes into the XY Sense software application. Meter data, whether it's installed by, comes from the utility or comes from a smart meter, that data then goes into the Gridium software application. Where should I, as the building owner, be thinking about that data going outside of your guys' platforms as well? So I'm asking you about integrations and how can this data be used elsewhere, and how should I be thinking about um, calculating the ROI of having that data go somewhere else, wherever it is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, we're energy nerds. So anything's not energy, we have an API, we push it up, and whoever wants to use it can use it. So, for instance, say that Jess's system was able to reduce air changes in a given space that is less occupied. In our API, we'd have the average rate for that time period,
Hmm,
and they could make an API call, calculate, use CFM to KWH as long as you got enough mechanical information, and calculate an ROI for that.
hmm,
For that. So our sort of box is to sort of like collect and diagnose for the energy professionals in the building, but of course there are other stakeholders here, and that's why we
totally.
have an open API for other people to use as
And
well.
you're talking specifically about the utility rate during that time
That is
period.
correct.
You then would feed that somewhere
Yeah,
else that
because it could
some
be three to
decision can
four
be
x
made.
difference depending
Yeah.
on what's
Hmm.
going on, and if you're able to affect the demand charge, it could be like 10 time difference.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that might be really important for you and really help you justify occupancy sensing technology.
Totally. Yeah. What are you thinking, Jess?
So with ours, there's a couple of things. We try to ingest as much data as we can because we also understand that not everyone wants to have to go to, several different dashboards. So currently we ingest indoor air quality data and some meeting room data, if it's through like Microsoft or Google, into our own platform. So it's really cool to be able to compare. One of the most powerful things I love to show is you can actually see the actual occupancy based on how many were in the meeting, or how many were in the meeting invite. So to see how
Mm,
many were actually in the room versus in the invite, which is really powerful. So we do try to do that, but we also understand, there are a lot of companies out there that will kind of normalize the data and put it into their own dashboard that's pulling in a lot of different building management analytics, not just occupancy, but also indoor air quality, also, energy consumption. They could, integrate with I mean, kind of anything from the building level that they're wanting to track and have in, one system. We have companies we work with, that as well.
Mhm.
We do have an open API. So, integrations are a part of pretty much every conversation.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, just to close us off here, I think we know and the community knows that the answer is probably both, right? I did want to like make sure we concluded with that. It sounds like, and maybe just I'll summarize what we're talking about here. What we're asking the building owner to do is go out and engage their organization around how each of these would play and how they might prioritize, different phases of each of these different technologies in different buildings. Eventually we want to get to the where every building has full occupancy data, full meter data, and the analytics that come with it. So that's where we're at right now, is figuring out how we get to that point. Anything that you guys want to add?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I agree, and we should definitely talk more, Tom. See how we can, work together. But if I had to, I guess, if I had to have my debating hat on and kind of my, closing statement,
Closing statements. All right, great.
would be that, at the end of the day, these buildings were built for employees and for people, to be able to come in, to collaborate, to have the spaces that they need to be the most productive. And even though that is also one of the more intangible ROIs, at the end of the day, that's why they were built. So it's so important to have that employee experience, employee wellness.
Mhm.
And the only way you're really going to get that is if you know how your spaces are being used. So go with occupancy sensors with XY sense.
Boom.
My
Boom. Love it.
close is I'm thinking of a customer just down the street here in Mountain View that we share, and that's what we should all be striving for, is someone that deploys advanced metering analytics as well as occupancy tracking, and I hope that's the vision of what our buildings look like in the future. And it doesn't matter where you're approaching this from an energy perspective or an occupancy perspective. I think it's always good to start with the data that you already have. Get your head around the problem first, whether that's getting your utility meter and understanding what the utility is trying to tell you, or your existing occupancy data. Get your head around that and then pick a path.
Totally. All right, you guys. Well done. Thank you for participating in this. I know it's awkward, but it's also really fun. So appreciate you both, and maybe we'll see
Thanks to
you
the
both.
editor. Thanks to the editor, whoever gets to edit this.
Yes, indeed. Editing is key for a quality podcast and a quality debate. So we'll see you both, I hope, at NexusCon, where we'll hope to do more of this style of fun conversing.
Okay, friends, thank you for listening to this episode. As we continue to grow our global community of changemakers, we need your help. For the next couple of months, we're challenging our listeners to share a link to their favorite Nexus episode on LinkedIn with a short post about why you listen. It would really, really help us out. Make sure to tag us in the post so we can see it. Have a good one.